Good afternoon and welcome to ITV's results coverage of the 2021 Senedd elections. Counting is underway across Wales and our reporters will bring you all the latest as this unprecedented campaign reaches its conclusion.
This map will soon start reflecting the way that you voted. I'll be crunching the numbers and explaining what it means.
And I'm here in the Senedd with all the political reaction as the next Welsh Parliament begins to take shape.
Hello and a very warm welcome to ITV Cymru Wales's results programme for the Senedd elections 2021. We are here all afternoon pretty much with reporters across the country in every region telling us what's happening in their patch. We will try to explain to you what the results are as they come in and why they matter. You can see in the bottom left of your screen a live total number of seats for each of the main parties, Labour, Conservatives and Plaid Cymru first, and then the grey box is a summary of the number of seats other parties have. So keep an eye on that. Stay with us for the next 3 hours. I know you may well have been tuning in for the likes of Judge Rinder, but potentially Adrian and I may just deliver you equal amounts of drama this afternoon. So let's go to Adrian now to bring us up to speed on exactly where we have reached so far. Give us a little reminder.
I'm not committing to that under oath, by the way. We are poised, Andrea, at an extremely tense and I would genuinely say this exciting moment in the election because the votes were counted. The votes we voted. That's the word I'm grasping for. We voted last night. That all finished at 10 o'clock. The votes have been counted since this morning. Some of the results are getting close. One of them is in. And to give you the overall sense of it, I've been using this phrase, for Wales, don't see England, because pretty much every other bit of election coverage you're going to see and read from across the UK will talk about a Conservative resurgence and a Labour struggling. Here in Wales, that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. More on that throughout the programme, no doubt, as we find out. This is how we're going to help you through all this. This gargantuan screen.
Some people may have been tuning in for game shows this afternoon. Well, there's one kind of right here, isn't there?
It's the Wheel of Fortune. I'm showing my age now. Let me talk you through this map. Well, it is a map to begin with. So do you remember when you voted? You had two votes, two ballot papers for this. So you voted for your Senedd member. So you chose a person belonging to a party, or it could have been an independent. The second one, you were voting for a party on what's called the regional list. Now, on the regional list, all those votes get added up and divided in a complicated way that we can't pretend to understand, but will deliver some results. So what we're looking at here, these are the constituencies, the local areas where you live. So if you live in, say, Islwyn, you might be thinking about being in Blackwood. Wrexham, it says it does exactly what it says on the tin. But those are your very local areas. These boxes here, they represent the regions: North, Mid and West, South West, South Central, South Wales East. There'll be 4 members each of that. So every one of us gets 5 members as a result of this process. Over the course of the next few hours, however long it's going to take, we'll fill up these 2 bits. And then into the Wheel of Fortune, which is actually the Senedd chamber. We've got one result, which looks a bit sad. It's not. It's exciting, and I'll explain why. There are 60 Senedd members, so we've drawn the line here, slap bang in the middle at 30. 30 is the important figure for everyone. Actually, they'd much prefer to get to 31. That's highly unlikely. It's never happened in the whole history of the Senedd. But all of the parties will want to fill these up to get as close as they can to that. But we can. Should we look at the one? This little sliver of blue represents Montgomeryshire, which is the rural Mid Wales seat, Newtown and Welshpool, Llanidloes, places like that. We expected it to be a Conservative win. A Conservative gain. It is. The Senedd member Russell George has kept it with, though, a hefty majority. So they'll be very pleased with that because it does look as though they're going to, as a party, are going to struggle throughout the rest of the day's results. So they will be pleased with Montgomeryshire. I should say that better brains than I have looked at this and have realised that compared to what our polls showed, the Conservative result is a bit down, and particularly the big losers here in this seat might be the Lib Dems. It's too early to draw out too much from one result, but one result.
So as you say, that was expected. It was expected to be a Conservative hold, a safe seat. Russell George there since 2011, I think. But when you were talking about the regional seats just now, they might not declare till a lot later on.
That's right. So because each region, if we can go back to the big map, each region, so Montgomeryshire is in Mid and West Wales. That's made up of several different constituencies. What they'll do is they wait till all of the constituencies in that region have voted. Then they'll start counting the regional votes that people have cast. So we could be looking at very late this evening. I'm not going to say it's going to go.
Well, we're back on at 9 p.m. tonight, aren't we? We might have some of them by then, you never know.
Just as well, isn't it? Yeah, so it could be quite late. I hope that they'll all want to get on with it and just count as much as they can. But it's an unusual election because of COVID and social distancing. Everything's changed in terms of the way they've campaigned and the way the parties have canvassed, but also in terms of the way that they've been counted.
And usually, of course, we're doing this through the night, aren't we? But this afternoon we have the pleasure of doing it for 3 hours in the afternoon. So it's slightly more pleasant for us, isn't it, anyway?
It is. It's unusual, but at least we should still be standing at the end of it.
Yeah. So we've got one seat in, as you say, that slither of blue on the Wheel of Fortune there, which represents the Senedd chamber. There'll be many more coming in throughout this afternoon. One seat that we think may be declaring imminently, or might be one of the next to declare in the next half an hour or so, is the Rhondda. Now, that's a particularly interesting seat for us this afternoon. In 2016, it was the only one to change hands, and it went to Plaid Cymru. Leanne Wood having a momentous victory there. We can see some live shots of the count in Tylerstown in the Rhondda going on as we speak, so live shots from the Rhondda there. Interestingly, Labour and senior Labour figures are declaring victory here, but I must emphasise that we do not have a declaration as yet. But we can talk to Rob Osborne, who is at our counts for us in Cardiff and looking at the Rhondda count very carefully as well. Rob, what are we hearing at the moment? Are you expecting, what are you hearing on the ground? Are we expecting any results in the next few minutes or next half an hour or so?
No, not in the next few minutes, half an hour or so, I'll tell you that. But let me explain where I am and why we're going to talk about the Rhondda. So I am in Cardiff. This is the seat of the First Minister and the Health Minister, among others. We expect them to be returned, and we're counting here the voters' verdicts. That's another Judge Rinder reference for you. But I'm also keeping an eye on the Rhondda in this South Wales Central region. And as you say, and I must put this in health warnings and caveats and all the rest of it, but Labour are confident they have retaken the Rhondda. Now, what does that mean? Well, it would mean that Leanne Wood has lost her seat. That is a big story. And Leanne Wood is a prominent figure here in Wales, the former leader of Plaid Cymru, a famous victory for the party back in 2016. The Rhondda is the jewel in the crown, if you like, for both Labour and Plaid Cymru, because it represents different things. For Labour, it represents their traditional post-industrial areas, which they have practically always represented, and for Plaid Cymru, it represents a breakthrough. So if it is true that Leanne Wood has lost her seat, and I emphasise again, if, that would be extremely disappointing for Plaid Cymru and obviously for Leanne Wood. Now, the votes are being counted. We hopefully will get the result while we're on air sometime later this afternoon.
Rob, for now, thank you very much. We'll be returning to you shortly, I'm sure. Let's go to another seat now, which is a real interest for us this afternoon and for you watching this afternoon. A real swing seat, again, between Labour and Plaid Cymru, currently held by Lee Waters. And Helen Mary Jones was in competition with him there for Llanelli. We can speak to Ellen, who's at the count for us and is going to be looking at Llanelli closely for us this afternoon. Now, if this was a disappointment for Plaid as well, we're looking at quite a story this afternoon. So what are you hearing there?
Good afternoon, Andrea. Well, as you can see behind me, counting is well underway here at Carmarthen. We've got the Carmarthen East and Dynevor seat here, but also the Llanelli seat. I'll just start with the Carmarthen East and Dynevor. This is considered a safe seat for Plaid Cymru, having won here in all of the last elections since 1999. The rumour here is that they are likely to secure that seat this time again. Adam Price was here just half an hour ago, had a flying visit and has now left, but he did look confident. Now then, on to the Llanelli seat. This is a marginal seat between Plaid Cymru and Labour. The type of seat that, well, both will be desperate to grab onto. Labour won here last time with only around 400 votes in it.
Helen Mary Jones, Plaid Cymru's candidate, is here this afternoon. Lee Waters nowhere to be seen at the moment. Expect this to be a tight race, one of the seats that will definitely define this election.
So I'll keep you updated. Ellen, for now, thank you very much indeed. We'll return to you a little later on this afternoon. So just to recap, if you've just joined us, we've just got one seat declared so far this afternoon, and that's a Conservative hold for Montgomeryshire and Russell George. So that was considered a fairly safe Conservative seat. So we do just have one result declared this afternoon so far, but we are here till 5 o'clock, so much more information to give you yet, so do stay with us. We're going to head north now and speak to Carol Green. The north area has been particularly of interest. In the northeast particularly, it's an area which we talk about in terms of a battleground for Labour and the Conservatives, and in the general election in 2019 we saw very much lots of those seats being taken by the Conservatives in some shock results there. Carol, what's the picture looking like for you?
Well, Andrea, that is the big question here in North East Wales. Those voters here who so convincingly backed the Conservatives in 2019, of course, Brexit was in play then. Did they lend their votes, or will they turn out for the Conservatives again? Back then, they turned that red wall, which stretched along North Wales, they turned it blue, and that's what the Conservatives have been hoping to do again. They've been campaigning with their big hitters here in North East Wales. We've had visits from the Prime Minister and also Rishi Sunak. Of course, the Vale of Clwyd. Now, the Vale of Clwyd is the towns of Rhyl Prestatyn and Denbigh, those rural villages as well. That's a top Tory target. They've also got their sights on Wrexham, and of course you've got a Welsh Labour minister has been sitting in that seat. But speaking to politicians here at the count for Delyn and for Alyn and Deeside today, they just can't put their finger on how it's going. It's very, very tight. That's the message coming from both camps, that these North East Wales seats will be very tight. There won't be that, as one Conservative candidate for Delyn, Mark Isherwood, he's also standing on the regional list. He said to me there won't be. He's not expecting an avalanche of change. I get the feeling that Labour, they're not expecting that disaster that the party have had in England and Hartlepool. They're not expecting that to happen here, but it's going to be very tight.
Carol Green in Deeside, thank you. And that's a story we're going to be watching all afternoon, of course, to see whether what's happening in the UK today and in seats like Hartlepool, which we've seen being taken by the Conservatives, to see how that plays out in Wales, if indeed that story does play out at all throughout the afternoon in Wales. Let's go to another seat now, which, is going to be considered a tight one, and that's the Vale of Glamorgan, and we can speak to Charanpreet Kaur. This is the seat of Jane Hutt, who is considered a very close advisor to the First Minister, Mark Drakeford. But this is a key Conservative target seat as well, Charanpreet.
It is, Andrea, and it's really all to play for here in the Vale of Glamorgan. We're at really early stages at the moment. Down below me, the counters are still at verification stage, so they're going through the vote piles, figuring out how many constituency votes, how many regional votes we've got. Both are important. I'll get to the regional votes in a minute, but the constituency that we're looking out for here is the Vale of Glamorgan. Now, Labour sources seem to be a little bit more confident than they had been earlier about this seat. They say that Jane Hutt's been well received on the campaign trail. Now, she has been in power here since 1999, and they're hoping that that personal vote will carry her through here. But that is just speculation. We really don't know how it's going to go at the moment. We can't read too much into it. It would be significant if they kept this seat, however, and it would mean that they were outperforming the polls and those early indications of how voters might decide this time round. It's a real target for the Conservatives. They're really keen to clinch this, and that will be vital for them in terms of challenging Labour's dominance. They had Boris Johnson here in Barry earlier this week, and so far the polls suggest that they're doing fairly well. So all to play for in the Vale of Glamorgan. We'll also be looking out later in the day for the regional result here for South Wales Central. At the moment, Andrew R.T. Davies holds a Conservative seat. seat. We're expecting him to hold that. Question is, will he have another Tory by his side, and how will those other 2 seats end up? All to play for here.
Sharon Pitt-Kara, Barry, looking closely at that Vale of Glamorgan count particularly, thank you very much indeed. And of course, a seat that the Conservatives hold at Westminster with former Welsh Secretary Alan Cairns. So we'll keep you posted on what's happening in the Vale of Glamorgan this afternoon. Let's go to a break now.
Therefore, I give public notice that Gareth Lloyd Davies wedi iawn ethol fel aelodol Senedd a gyfer etholaeth Dyffryn Clwyd, duly elected as the member of the Senedd for the Vale of Clwyd constituency.
Now that the Tories have gained. We're going to hear from the winning candidate now. Excuse me.
The counting staff, the security today, Devonshire County Council, and also the leisure centre staff, polling station staff for a safe election and a safe count here today in Denbigh. I also want to thank my amazing campaign team who've been with me all the way through the campaign over the months and weeks. And thanks for supporting me all the way. I also want to thank Anne Jones, who has stepped down at this election after 22 years of serving the Vale of Clwyd constituency with distinction. But most of all, I want to thank the people of the Vale of Clwyd for putting their trust in me. And I look forward to getting to work in the constituency, which is my home, and I'll be proud to represent. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
So there we've just been hearing from Gareth Davies. Now Gareth Davies, big story really this afternoon. The Conservatives gain the Vale of Clwyd. That's the key target seat for the Welsh Conservatives. They will be over the moon with that result. And the winner there, the new member of the Senedd for the Vale of Clwyd, is Gareth Davies. He is an NHS physiotherapist, so he has gained that seat from the Labour Party. And just to remind you that whatever happened in the Vale of Clwyd, we were going to get an UMS because, as you just heard there, Gareth Davies was paying tribute to Anne Jones, who was standing down for the Labour Party. But we often talk about that area of North Wales, which is a target for the Tory party. And many of those so-called red wall seats fell in 2019 during the general election to the Tories. And there's been lots of speculation that some of those seats might fall to the Tories this time around. And indeed, we've just seen breaking news this afternoon that has happened in the Vale of Clwyd. Adrian, this is really significant.
Look how close it is there. Majority of 366, but that's extremely close. Too close for comfort for the Conservatives. Still a big blow for Labour, but I think the overall pattern is that that Labour has held up more. Its vote has held up much more strongly across the north than the Conservatives would like, which means it's going to make it increasingly difficult for the Conservatives to win any of those other red wall seats that we talk about across the north. Just had a text from a Conservative. We've got one over the line. Which is probably about as good as they can expect in there. I should say that, I mean, the Conservatives have been on a roller coaster for this because all the signs were that this was going to be something of a breakthrough election for them, particularly with those seats in the north, traditional Labour voting seats that looked like they were going to turn Conservative, and saw visits from people like Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson and a lot of attention put on them. It hasn't worked out. But
well, the Conservative Party, speaking to Ellie earlier on and talking about the rock star effect of Boris Johnson visiting those seats in the north.
And you can't deny that. You see it. I mean, it's undoubtedly there. People do seem to like him and enjoy his presence in there, but it hasn't. While it has worked, clearly has worked elsewhere in the UK, in Hartlepool and in councils up and down England, it hasn't worked for the Welsh Conservatives. So there'll be some internal questioning going on.
Yes, we'll talk a bit more about that. But we were talking, weren't we, last night to Simon Hart on the programme, building up to this, and he was talking about the pizzazz and charisma of Boris Johnson. And I was asking him whether the pizzazz and charisma cancelled out all those allegations and scandals that we've heard about in recent weeks. Well, this is an interesting talking point as we get this result in, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, what we're going to have to ask, because what we were looking at, or what we thought we were looking at, was the Welsh Conservatives in Wales not suffering as a result of all those controversies. Have they? I'm not sure yet, or whether it's been a uniquely Welsh election and it's actually been a verdict on the Welsh Conservatives, for one, and on Welsh Labour's record, particularly Mark Drakeford's handling of the pandemic. And I guess that's what we'll find out in the coming hours.
Thank you. And I'm going to speak to Adrian straight away now, because I think we've got to the moment where we can summarise the afternoon, haven't we? And that is your job, I'm pleased to say.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Well, let me take you into my detailed map, which what have we been doing for the last 3 hours? Some people on Twitter and other places have been going on to us for speculating, as if we're making this up. But no, we haven't had any results. But I'm sorry, I'm ranting now, aren't we? No, we haven't had any results, or we haven't had many results. But what I'm reporting back to you, and what our reporters are telling us, are what the parties are saying to us. So we're reflecting the story that is going on, and the story that is going on, which if in due course, by 10 o'clock, we should have some more pretty colours in this diagram. We're going to show exactly how the constituencies have changed or not changed. They're the smaller areas around where you live locally, and how these regions, which are the bigger areas, and which are elected in a different way, how those have translated into seats in the Senedd, and what that means in terms for the next Welsh government, and whether anybody actually gets to this middle point, which is 30 seats at least, in order to be able to form a government without having to do some kind of deal. So, having said all that, where we are at the moment is that Labour, which is looking on course to be the biggest party, which won't be a surprise. That's been happening for many, many years now, and it's what polls were showing. Though polls were also showing that Labour was going to have a fairly ropey day. I've got to remember where we are. It's not. But it's not popping the champagne corks just yet, because both the electoral system and the various other things that are going on could well mean that Mark Drakeford won't have enough seats to form a government. So it's not all positive for Labour. The Conservatives, the polls were showing them as having some kind of surge. They're not. They have got some bright spots, and they have got some hopes in the regional seats, but it hasn't been what they were looking for. And for Plaid Cymru too, not so great, but it's not a complete collapse, at least not yet. But we don't know what these regions are saying, and that could mean all sorts of small parties. It could mean good or bad news for the big parties, and it could mean good or bad news for whoever wants to form a government. So that's a cliffhanger.
And if you really like your cliffhangers, you might even want to return tomorrow, because some of those regional seats, we might get the results tomorrow, Adrian. So we've really whetted your appetites this afternoon, I think. That brings us to a close. If you've stuck with us for 3 hours, then, well, congratulations, and thanks for being with us as the Senedd election story of 2021 unfolded, albeit a little bit more slowly than we might have predicted. It is still unfolding, and there'll be updates at itv.com/Wales with Jonathan Hill on Wales at 6, and Adrian and myself will be back, at 9 p.m. with a special Wales Decides. Don't miss that. Take a breath. Goodbye. Mark Drakeford looks set to remain as First Minister and Labour to keep hold of power. Tonight we'll bring you all the latest as the counting continues.
I've got all the numbers as we await the final result and the next Welsh Parliament takes shape.
And I'm in the Senedd with all the reaction to the political fallout, and I'll be asking the question, what happens next?
What next indeed? Well, hello and good evening. Welcome back to Wales Decides. We are almost 2/3 of the way through the results in the Senedd elections 2021. Thanks for rejoining us. We're starting to get a slightly clearer picture now as we head later into the evening, and there have been some big headlines in the last couple of hours with seats changing hands in the Rhondda and in Brecon and Radnorshire as well, to name two. Professor Roger Arwen-Scully is here for some in-depth analysis this evening as we look at crunching those numbers in a bit more detail. And of course, Adrian Masters is where he's been most of the day at his big screen and the so-called Wheel of Fortune there. And it's filled up a bit now, hasn't it?
It has.
But still, as we look at it, only three colours there. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more with Roger in a moment. But bring us up to speed, because a lot has happened since you and I went off air at 5 o'clock.
It has. I think the story now is, the story has changed throughout the day, hasn't it? From when we began earlier on to around tea time and then now. The story now is Labour's victory in Wales. What size will the party be in the Senedd? Will it even have a majority? Which is quite an extraordinary thing to be talking about, considering what we were talking about at the beginning of when we went on air earlier on. So let's have a look at the big screen. I'm not going to call it the Wheel of Fortune anymore. I think it's the countdown screen now. So as we get closer to the middle point, we'll start playing the countdown music, if that's all right. So what we're looking at, just to remind you, is the results as they're coming in. Remember, we had two votes when we voted on Thursday. We voted for a constituency, the local area that we live in, and we voted for an individual there belonging to a party. Then we also voted for a party for the region. So all those votes get added up and they get translated into the constituencies, which the map of Wales is divided up into. And you can see there are just two left of the constituencies, 2 of the 40s. Then, and what is happening now, is all the regional votes are being added up, and through a bit of mathematical jiggery-pokery that only people like Roger understands, it will be translated into Senedd members who are called regional list members. There's 4 for each region. We'll be putting them into these boxes here. This is the Senedd, and here you have clearly Labour, the biggest party already. Whatever else happens, that's there. This line here, there are 60 Senedd members. This is in the middle. That's 30. So 30 is, they'd rather 31, but 30 is a workable majority. They could form a government that way. It wouldn't be easy, but they could do it. And at the beginning of the day, we were talking about no party getting there, but Labour is no, I shouldn't do that, should I? Is getting very close to get that 30. The other story is... How much
sugar have you had to keep you going this evening,
it's all those double deckers. Important thing to say is, of the other 2 big parties, the Conservatives are looking at a good share of the vote, but it's not translating into seats, particularly not those Labour seats that they thought that they could take as they had at a Westminster level. Plaid Cymru is looking like having a very terrible result, and there are going to be some big questions asked for Plaid Cymru.
And Roger, as I mentioned earlier on, 3 colours there, and last Senedd election there were 5 parties in the Senedd. Is it likely, is it possible that it could stay as 3 colours?
It is possible. So yeah, we've seen the Liberal Democrats disappear from the constituency map there. We don't yet know how the regional list votes are going to play out, but we have seen some of the smaller parties doing pretty badly on the constituency votes, and if that pattern is repeated on the regional list votes, then we could see Abolish, Reform, UKIP and the Liberal Democrats and the Greens all falling short of the roughly about 6.5–7% you need in a region to get those regional list seats, in which case they would all again remain going to Plaid Cymru, the Conservatives and Labour.
And are we expecting to get some of those regional councils as we're on air tonight? Is that a possibility?
So we're thinking we'll get some of that tonight and then the rest coming in tomorrow. But if we get the results in Mid and West Wales, that'll be really interesting, because that is where Labour have their best chances of getting regional list members. They only have 1 constituency in that region. And at the moment, if we're thinking that Labour are going to win 27 constituencies. They should win at least 2 regional list members in Mid and West Wales. So it's looking like Labour on a minimum of 29 seats.
Well, that's not what we were saying at the start of the day, and indeed earlier on in the week either, so it's quite phenomenal really. Let's pick up on that with Rob Osborne, who's in Cardiff for us this evening. And I think the only Cardiff count, the only count in the capital waiting to be declared now is the First Minister's seat of Cardiff West. Is there any sign of him there tonight? I'm sure he's going to have a smile on his face, isn't he, Rob?
Well, if Adrian is calling this countdown, think of me as Carol Vorderman, and the numbers I am awaiting is Cardiff West. It is the only of the 4 seats in the capital city which haven't declared, and it is the seat of the First Minister. And if memory recalls from 5 years ago when I was at this count, it was Cardiff West, the seat of the then Health Minister, I think he was, maybe in Public Services, Mark Drakeford, which was the last to declare. I can tell you, he's here. He's standing over there right now as they're still counting the votes. And he is quiet, he's reflective, he's not jumping for joy. But I have been speaking to senior Labour sources here who say, quote, this is a very good night for Labour. And I can tell you, here's a bit of exclusive, he's been watching ITV Wales today and he's been seeing the results come through. And I think he is very happy, winning places like the Rhondda, holding places like Llanelli and the other key battlegrounds that they thought they were going to lose. The plan for what we expect is that hopefully within the hour, we will get a result from Cardiff West, and then the First Minister will stand on the podium, likely be declared the victor, and then hopefully we'll be having a chat with him. What we have heard is that Cardiff Central and Cardiff North have been held by the Labour Party, and Cardiff South and Penarth, the seat of Vaughan Gethin, the Health Minister. That was around half an hour ago that was declared. He was smiling like I've never seen him smile before, given the year of handling COVID he's had. He's very happy. And I think that sums up the mood for Labour. Look, Mark Drakeford was called the quiet man of Welsh politics. When he stood for the Labour leader, people were saying, is he a bit boring? Is that going to turn the voters off? Well, you heard Adrian now. We're talking a possible majority territory. Possibly Mark Drakeford has been vindicated.
It did sound like Mark Drakeford when we spoke to him earlier on. He was still sounding quite cautious and talking about whether people had turned out to vote. Well, he probably should have something of a smile on his face now, surely.
I literally bumped into him earlier as I was watching Vaughan Gethin's count. I turned round and, oh, hello, First Minister. Hello. I've been watching you all day, he said. And no, he's playing it cool. He wants to see the numbers. He knows a few seats here and then could make a difference as to whether he goes it alone or he may need to seek help. It's not looking like that based on what Adrian and Roger are saying. But the people around him, they are smiling.
Rob Osborne, will return to you as and when we might hear that declaration later on in the evening. Not such a good night as it's developing for Plaid Cymru. The leader there, Adam Price, still waiting to hear if he's to keep his seat. He says that he remains positive despite the disappointing results in the Rhondda, where Plaid's Leanne Wood lost her seat to Labour's Elizabeth Buffy Williams. That is hugely significant, of course, because back in 2016, she made headlines for all the right reasons, the only seat to change hands. So this time, as you can see her there, pictures of just when she made her speech on the stage there, and she's leaving the count. Those were pictures from a little earlier on, with a disappointment there of losing the seat to Labour and to Buffy Williams. Let's hear a reaction to that from the leader, Adam Price, now.
I'm still enthused by what was an incredibly positive campaign for us. We've got new voters coming over for the first time, young voters in particular, unprecedented numbers supporting Plaid Cymru because of our positive message of hope and change, and of course our vision of an independent Wales that is going to deliver for us ultimately a country which can realise its potential. So in terms of the big picture, the long view, then I think this has been an incredible step forward for those of us in the independence movement, and certainly we feel incredibly energised by the warmth and enthusiasm that we had in this campaign for Plaid Cymru's message.
Because Rhondda and Llanelli were simply must-wins for you as a party and didn't quite manage that this time round. That must be a disappointment.
Oh, I'm always, disappointed, and certainly to lose, dear friends and colleagues from the Senedd. Then obviously that is a setback and upsetting. I'm impatient for change. That's why I'm in politics, because I want this nation to move forward, to realise its potential, and of course I want it to happen now. But I'm still encouraged by the positive response that Plaid has had, and I genuinely feel we have sowed the seeds of change in this election, and many of those conversations that we've had may not have resulted in votes for us this time, but we have built a bridge in people's minds that now are open to the idea of Wales becoming an independent nation. And when they look at the politics that is happening in the country next door, in England, a country that is moving further and further to the right, and we see the contrast between our politics and our values here in Wales, then I'm convinced more and more people in the future will come over to the independence movement, will vote for Plaid Cymru, and we will see that political progress that we want to see. In the meantime, we will use the platform that we have. We will use every voice and every vote and every seat that we have to do the most important thing of all, which is to improve the lives of the people of Wales.
Well, I hope you've got back to the sofa with your cuppa. Now, just before the break, we were at the Cardiff West declaration where the First Minister secured his seat. But listen to this. The majority is quite staggering, and the increase in the majority is quite staggering. So in 2016, it was a majority of just over 1,000, and now it's just over 10,000. Let's return to Cardiff West now and speak to Rob Osborne, who I think is with the First Minister. Rob.
Yes, 10 minutes before we come off air and we can speak to the man of the moment, First Minister Mark Drakeford. Congratulations on your victory here. People have been asking me all night, is he smiling? You're smiling now?
Well, I'm smiling now because we have the result in Cardiff West. Very grateful indeed to people in my constituency for re-electing me for another 5 years and putting their trust in Welsh Labour.
Why has Welsh Labour succeeded where Labour over the border has not?
Much too early, Rob, for me to have an answer to that question. I've spent my whole day, as I have the last month, concentrating on Wales and Labour's performance here in Wales, and we've exceeded the expectations that we came into this election with, and still some results to go.
What were we can speak honestly now, what were your expectations for tonight? What did you think you were going to end up with?
Well, I always thought that we would do better than that original poll that put us on 22 seats. Did I think that we would be up, approaching the top of the 20s? That was probably at the top end of what I thought was achievable, given the extraordinary circumstances of this election.
Do you think you got enough for a majority? What's your intelligence telling you?
Well, no party's ever won a majority in the Senedd, and it's very hard indeed to find those extra couple of seats. But we'll be far closer to it than I think anybody imagined we would be.
So you will go it alone?
No, I've no idea. We will think very carefully. We will look at all the results, all the regional results. A third of the Senedd is still to be elected, and it's been a very long day here in the Cardiff West count, and in looking at constituencies across Wales. I will want to sit down tomorrow when we have the full suite of results in front of us to think about how we can achieve what we need here in Wales which is stable and progressive government.
Very quickly, last question. Do you feel vindicated? Because when you stood for Labour leader, some had question marks over whether you were the right candidate. How do you feel on a personal level tonight?
Well, of course, it is fantastic on a personal level to see the sort of results we've had right across Wales. And everywhere I've been in this campaign, we've had such a warm reception from people. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and tonight it is a bit of a culmination of all of that.
First Minister, thank you. And there we are. Mark Drakeford, more than likely returning as First Minister.
Rob Osborne and Mark Drakeford, thank you very much indeed. Well, a talk there with the First Minister about that race to 30 and whether or not he thinks they can even secure a majority, which seems quite extraordinary to be talking about. Well, one of the seats which is yet to declare, the only one which is yet to declare in terms of the constituencies, is the Vale of Glamorgan, which is a Tory target seat. The Welsh Conservatives would very much like to get hold of this seat, but at the moment it's Jane Hutt for Labour to see whether she can hold on to it, and that would certainly help with the race to 30 and possibly speculating about that majority. Let's go to Charan Preet for the latest. She's in Barry for us this evening. Charan Preet.
Well, Andrea, to take the words out of Mark Drakeford's mouth there, it has been a long day here in the Vale of Glamorgan and we're still waiting. We are the last constituency in Wales to get that all-important result. And as the time ticks on, the tension's building too. Now, we've heard from Labour sources on the floor that they're quietly confident about Jane Hutt's chances of winning this, and that will, as you say, really help Mark Drakeford's chances in this race to 30. But it's certainly not a done deal. Conservatives are also optimistic, perhaps both sides both putting their bravest face forward. We really don't know at the minute. I've had my fingers and toes crossed that we'd get a declaration for you before 10 o'clock, but that's looking unlikely. Now, Jane Hutt clinched the seat here last election with a razor-thin majority of 777 votes. The question is, can she do it again? And when that's all over, we'll be back tomorrow to find out about the regional list. As we've heard already, we've got 2 Tory seats there at the moment. It's looking likely that that will remain the case. And then there's the Clyde seat and the UKIP seat up for grabs. All of these could affect the big picture of what we're looking at for our next Senedd.
Charan Preet in Barry. It certainly has been a long day. You never know. We still have got about 7 minutes left. Who knows what could happen in the next 7 minutes? We might be returning to you. In the meantime, grab your chocolate bars and your caffeine because you might need it, as you say. Still possibly a while to go yet in the Vale of Glamorgan. Now, we heard Mark Drakeford talking about his victory in Cardiff West just before. He was also asked the question by Rob Osborne there, would they be going it alone then? He wouldn't be drawn on that. Let's get some reaction to everything we've heard over the last few minutes by crossing to the Senedd now and speaking to Ellie Pitt, who's joined by her guests this evening.
Thanks, Andrea. Yes, well, I think it's time to start asking the question, what happens next, really? So I'm joined tonight by Labour's Carwyn Jones, by the Conservatives' David Davis, and by Plaid Cymru's Ben Lake. Ben, let's start with you. And we've got to ask the question, does Adam Price stay as leader?
Without doubt. I don't think there's a question of it. You know, yes, there will be some disappointment tonight in the party ranks, but we'll wait to see the regional results, which may well give a different tint to things. And in the morning, we'll dust ourselves down, look at where things went well, and they certainly did go well in certain areas of Wales, learn those lessons, as well as the lessons from those areas that perhaps didn't go as well and according to plan, and just focus now on building on those new candidates that we have in parts of Wales where historically perhaps we aren't seen as challengers, and then start for the campaign for 2026 tomorrow.
And very briefly, sticking with the same message of independence, perhaps?
I think so. I think one of the big questions facing UK politics, as well as Welsh politics in the next couple of years, will be constitutional ones, I'm afraid to say. And on that matter, I think it's always good to have a clear line. And I think the party has decided to go that way, and I think we should stick with it.
Fair enough. With the Conservative camp, Andrew Davis, can he remain as leader? Can he survive this?
Oh, I think he can, but obviously it's a matter for the team to decide who they want as leader. It's none of my business. But I imagine what the Conservative Party will be saying is we have to accept the result. Clearly, Labour are going to be running Wales for the next few years, whether in a majority or in some sort of with a bit of extra help.
Do you want to keep him as the leader, though? We're here again in 5 years' time. Do you want to go into the next
I think
election,
I think Andrew's done an excellent job. What I want to see us do now is to show responsible opposition, to be challenging Labour over issues like the health service, which isn't as effective as it is in England, education, where even Labour have admitted they've had problems, and over issues like the M4 relief load, to continue to do that in a responsible fashion, but also to offer support to the Labour government over the big issues like the pandemic, where support is needed, to show responsible opposition. That's what we will inevitably be doing after this.
To gain any traction in Wales, do you think the Conservatives need to give a more direct message to the Welsh people rather than just say, well, look at England for our track record?
Yes, I think we have to offer a very clear message to the people of Wales, and clearly it certainly hasn't been clear enough at the moment. But I'm not putting any blame on anyone for that. I mean, it's been a very difficult year. For now, I would accept that based on these results, inevitably Mark Drakeford is going to be the First Minister, and our job as responsible opposition is to accept that result and to offer scrutiny, fair scrutiny of Labour's policies over the coming years.
Mark Drakeford remains First Minister, perhaps then, as you sort of imply there. But Carwyn Jones, he's saying that, they might be able to go it alone, but he might need to lean on others. It's not easy going it alone, is it? From your experience, tell me what's going through your mind.
Well, it's too early yet to tell what the final arithmetic will look like. And that's an important factor. But what you do have in this place is there's a tradition here of working with other parties in a way that isn't quite there in Westminster, because no one's ever had a majority, and that means you talk to other parties. If you're taking legislation through, you find out what the common ground is. There are discussions over the budget. So actually you can govern here with a minority, if that's what you feel is possible, because of that tradition of cross-party working. Exceptionally
quickly, who do you think he might be looking to lean on in times of need?
We'll have to wait and see what the arithmetic looks like. I don't know. I mean, if you're asking me to predict what the regional list result will be, I'll leave that to people who are far more qualified than me.
A unionist coalition, Carwyn.
Sorry?
A unionist coalition.
A grand coalition. We'll all be in power, no in opposition. There we are.
Well, there you are. You heard it here first. That's one of the strategies, perhaps, going forward. My guests tonight, thank you all very much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Andrea, for now, it's back to you.
Yes, we really appreciate it too. Thanks very much, Ellie. Well, there's a phrase we can pick up on, a grand coalition. There we go. We might be talking about that for the next few days. Roger, we're nearly coming to the end of the programme this evening. What a day it has been. One of the things that it seems quite staggering is some of the huge majorities that we've seen. What's happening with the share of the vote? Where are all these votes coming from?
Well, a lot of it is coming from people who voted for UKIP 5 years ago. UKIP's vote has collapsed, more or less, and we're seeing that rebounding to the benefit in many places of the Conservatives and also the Labour Party.
So, and also, we don't yet know, do we, what's happening with those votes in the regional seats? That's all to play for still.
No, we don't. And whether any of these smaller parties will get enough votes to get representation, or whether the three parties we see on the map here will actually be the ones dominating the regional list seats as well.
Well, we didn't think we'd quite be here, did we?
Really did
for so many reasons, but also because things were very slow to get off to a start this afternoon, weren't they? But now we have just one seat left to declare in the Vale of Glamorgan. Where are we at, Adrian?
Doesn't it look nice now that there's all this colour in there? Yes, we've just got the one result to wait for. You were right. We didn't expect this result. We expected Labour to be the biggest party, but we didn't expect to be talking about a clear Labour victory and a possible Labour majority. That's something quite extraordinary. What I'm still trying to get to grips with is quite why the Conservatives, who've had a good campaign and objectively had a good result, have also had a disappointing time. Why that hasn't translated across why what has been happening in England hasn't translated across to Wales, because there was every sign that was going to happen. So I'm sure the Conservatives will be asking the same question as David Davis said. So yeah, we're in interesting times, I think, because the reason I keep doing this job is because politics changes all the time. It's like a kaleidoscope, and it gets shaken again. And we've just been through the most turbulent and unsettled Senedd of the whole time of devolution, and it looks like, I know it's early days and I'll probably regret this, but it looks like it might be a settled, stable sort of Senedd for 5 years.
Well, not a grand coalition then.
Oh no, I don't think we'll see that. I'm not going to make that prediction. No.
Adrian, I think you're going to be back there on Monday. We'll be speaking again, won't we? We'll speak then.
I'll just sleep here.
You sleep there. And that's it from the Wales Decides programmes for today. Thank you very much for your company. Just one constituency seat left to declare. We'll bring you updates over the weekend. Thanks. Bye-bye.